Hi everyone, welcome back to the Earthly Love podcast, and I'm so pleased that I took the decision to extend the episodes that were due to come out in 2020 and took that decision to include the last 2 episodes that are coming up. This is one of them, which were recorded in November 2020, and maybe it was my capacity, but I was just thinking, we'll record these and then we'll just keep them over till 2021, and being part of these conversations and just living and experiencing the goodness in each and every one of these. I mean, the whole series have been really well, but these last 2 ones are keeping the bar high. So we're going out on a high here for the first season. It's just like, it would have been selfish of me. I'm not even going to say lazy of me, but it would have been me not keep on pushing hard if I just let these sit on the MacBook and waiting for a few more months down the line to release them. So I'm so pleased that I made that decision to bring you some extra episodes this year because they're well worth it. They're well worth it. So this one with Velda Thomas, we met many moons ago when I was over in Washington State on a Black Nature residency. And I'm sure we just met at the tail end of my visit there. I went there a number of times. And I was introduced to her by Sarah Spaeth, who was the executive director at the time of the Jefferson Land Trust. And, she says, you must meet Velda, sound therapist and a woman of colour. And she's looking to get some land. And, so it's really good if you talk to her. So I met her at a place of work and we chatted. And then we kept up an email correspondence so I could get to know Velda better, so then I could write a poem in response to our conversations. And I remember the poem because it was almost like a love song to the earth, and it was all about Velda and how she liked to get her hands dirty in the soil to be really close to the earth and honour her, the earth, and what bounty she brings for us. And so it was really good to continue that conversation in a sense for this podcast and to find out that there's that history within Velda's ancestry. Her grandfather, she mentions her granddad from the Caribbean, who instilled in her that love of the land and working the land, but communing with the land to bring forth sustenance and subsistence farming, produce that was then shared throughout the community. And that obviously left an impression with Velda, because now she's a woman herself with her own land and able to live debt free because of that, and being a steward. And that's what we explore within this episode, the idea of stewardship. And that can only come if you actually take ownership of yourself. And I think this flows really well into my last intro when I was saying that I am self-loving, self-caring, self-acceptance of myself now, and how I'm practicing that day to day, moment to moment. And it does mean that I have that ownership of myself and who I am, flaws and all. So then I can, as I was saying, show up in the world and be of service to others, but to nature, to Mother Earth, and really step up and be a steward. Protect, conserve, champion, foster closer relationships in others that look like me, so then we can have that community and that self-power, self-acceptance, self-ownership, so we are standing as stewards for nature, for Mother Earth, do so that from a truth, from a real body, knowledge, wisdom of ourselves and how we are connected. We are one with nature. So we touch upon this, and sovereignty is another word that comes up, and our past of how we've had that disconnection from the land, and that wasn't of our doing. We were forced from our homes, from our lands, and taken across the Atlantic Ocean to work somebody else's land for their profits. And how once that freedom came from the plantations, from slavery, then there was that run from the land because it held such trauma. And what we discuss is how going back to the land can actually heal that trauma, almost like that circle, going back to the land from where we were taken from the land, because our ancestors, and my West African ancestors, were rural. They were farmers. They had that connection with the land, and in that white hand coming into our continent and stealing and taking and being helped. I know they were helped by Black people, Africans, but taking our ancestors away from the land, we've lost that connection, and how we're trying to rebuild that connection, remember that connection now. And then we talk about our writing and how nature shows up in our writing. And the final thing is about grief. We do touch upon grief, and again, how we have to allow ourselves to process, to transform through all these feelings of loss, of grief, of death, to be actually reborn, rebirth, the next better version of ourselves, bringing along all that we have learned and carried in the process. So it's a good episode, and I think you're going to enjoy it. So after this one, there'll be one more episode with a guest, and then I think I'm going to finish off the series with the solo one, where we'll recap. We'll go over what we have achieved this year. We will celebrate. We had a party to begin, and we're going to have a party to end the first season, because we have done good. Let's hope you enjoy this episode. Take care. Bye for now. Welcome, Velda Thomas, to the Earthly Love podcast. Thank you so much.
Happy to be here.
It's so good to see you. I mean, it's been years.
It has been a long time. It has been a really long time. And I remember just that we had that lovely connection when you were here all those years ago. So it's wonderful to kind of keep that thread alive.
Let's just establish the basics. I usually ask all my guests, it's like, where are you in the world? What season is it? And what can you see outside your window?
Yeah. So I'm in the Pacific Northwest coast of the USA of America. So in the state of Washington. It is fall, and outside of my window, I have a stand of 4 big cedar trees that I'm looking at, and kind of a maple tree to the side that's shedding its leaves right now. So yeah, we have the evergreens and the deciduous, and we live on a piece of woodland that's about 2.5 acres. So we're surrounded by nature.
Yeah, thank you. Because I remember when we connected after my visit to Washington State, there was
Uh-huh.
that issue. Were you trying to get land then, and it wasn't quite happening? And you might have been living in Port Townsend, but it sounds now that you have got land. You have got
Right.
your own land now.
Yeah, we do. We do have our own land. Yeah, we've been in a lot of different living situations here. I think I kind of consider us homesteaders, or
Mm.
like lately, I've been thinking about the kind of vision of the Black pioneer. You
Oh,
know, the person that kind of goes back to the land and homesteads and kind of is in ownership and stewardship of the land more than ownership, I guess I would say. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
we do. Mhm.
Because that's a lovely word, stewardship. And I came to know that word through coming to Port Townsend, working with the Jefferson Land Trust and Sarah, and that idea of stewardship. What does that mean to you? Rather than, as you said, you corrected yourself, rather than ownership.
I mean, actually, I do believe that for people of color and Black people specifically, it's really important for us to step into our sovereignty and to kind of claim, like, maybe it's more like a self-dominion in the body, and then we can step into stewardship. So I think that it's almost like ownership and stewardship maybe come hand in hand. um, so anyway, well, I feel like for me, once we bought this piece of land, it was completely wooded with nothing on it. So the stewardship is it's like being in relationship with the land and understanding, taking the time to listen and understand and see what the land is calling for rather than trying to be dominant over the land. Does
Mm.
that make sense a
Oh,
little
God.
bit?
Yeah, no, totally. It makes sense.
Yeah.
And I would think, I mean, I'm seeing changes now, but I would say that's a minority actually attitude to not try and dominate nature and the land, because
Yeah.
I feel that we're in this present situation because of that need, that desire, that want to dominate the land and just to
Yeah.
squeeze out as much as we can get from it. You know, it's a
Absolutely.
resource, it's an asset, it doesn't have life or sovereignty in its own right. It's just a case of
Mhm.
there as something that we can use
Yeah.
and abuse. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when we first bought this piece of land, it was kind of like, the tendency would be here in the US to get some big machinery in, like hire a building company and just like kind of basically, I feel like, excavators are pretty violent towards the land if they're not used with care.
Mm.
So we happened to find somebody who was an old farmer here, old farmer friend of mine, that agreed to come and help us kind of sculpt the land. And it's a sloping piece of property. So we didn't have any flat space that we could actually, I mean, of course you can build in a hillside, but I would say it was kind of like maybe a 30-degree angle of land. So we ended up kind of just really taking our time. We lived on it for about a year before we actually had the excavator come in. And then in that year, we took our time I did a lot of work in the woods, clearing the underbrush and just kind of getting to know the trees and the feeling of the land. So once the excavator came in, we had an idea of what we wanted to expose. I mean, I feel like kind of like plants, humans need sun. So we didn't want to live like right in the depths of the woods in the dark. We needed some sun. So we kind of made about a quarter-acre clearing, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, we do a lot of stuff by hand. I mean, I feel like that's what I'm talking about, kind of the Black pioneer. I'm pretty handy with a pickaxe. And yeah, we do a lot of our own stuff. We've built a small cabin here. You can kind of see a little bit of it behind me.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have debt, which is
Oh,
amazing.
wow.
So in terms of kind of like being able to have a feeling of sovereignty, I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Like, feeling like, okay, I'm living on this land, I'm taking care of the land, And I don't know, I feel like I was born kind of feeling indebted for, I don't even know why, you know? So to have that feeling of like, we're just building as we go, as we have the resources, it does sometimes mean that we have to live a little differently, you know, than other people, a little more simple. But, you know, I think we're okay with that. Yeah.
Oh gosh, that sounds wonderful, to be actually debt free.
Yeah.
And living in relationship, connection, and harmony with the land. And I think you just saying that now actually makes sense, because I've said you're looking good, you're looking really, you're glowing, you know, and different to when I saw you last. I'm assuming that's because there's stress that's been just dropped, you know, being tied to the Western way of producing and going about life really in your own, in that own space. You are on your own time. And so are you still, I want to talk more about the land, but let's just talk. Are you still a sound practitioner and a licensed massage practitioner?
I'm still practicing body work, energy work, massage, sound. I'm writing a lot. So I'm super excited. Actually, in some ways, more excited about writing than I am about other things. But I feel like, you know, when you get to live a life and experience a lot of different things, it all feeds into the writing. So the writing is right now very healing for me.
Yeah, because that's what it was, a case of getting your July newsletter, and it was a lovely picture of you sitting down amongst some wildflowers. There was some red wildflowers, and that was beautiful. I think, I must get back in touch with Velda.
My daughter styled that picture, you know.
It's beautiful.
So fun.
And then when I read that you were writing, and you're writing about travel, you say healing trauma and horses and being a woman and being a woman of color. And you've recently set up a Patreon page.
Right. Yeah.
So people can support your writing and get this exclusive writing. So, you know, just let's talk a little bit about your writing. You're excited about that. And I'm totally on the same page when you're saying everything that you are doing in your life, those experiences do feed into your writing. And I use it as a way maybe to process those experiences, to work through. How are you using your writing now?
Well, first of all, I kind of have to say that I feel like, you know, as a younger person, as a child, I used to write a lot. I was really kind of had a really vivid imagination, and I was a big dreamer, you know, so oftentimes people would like snap their fingers and be like, come on, like snap out of it, Velda, you know, get here. So I think I was really kind of in my own imaginary space a lot of the time growing up. And I think then, you know, I don't know, maybe as you grow, you just kind of put those aspects of yourself to one side, kind of not even realizing how important it is. So for years, I was a journaler, but never, ever considered myself a writer. Let me think. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I ended up meeting my daughter in Morocco. And I was there for about 3 days by myself before she arrived. And I was sitting on the rooftop, kind of scrolling through my phone. And all of a sudden, I was just like, I think I'm going to write something. I'm going to open this notepad and just kind of start writing. And it was like my muse arrived, and I had this voice that I was even a little bit unfamiliar with in the words. Like looking back at it, I'm like, who wrote that, you know? So what happened was I started just posting kind of travel blog on Facebook. And a lot of people responded to that. And then I started posting things about my relationship to my body, being a person with brown skin in a predominantly white community. I got a lot of comment and a lot of interaction on those kind of posts. So that was kind of like 2018. So then kind of fast forward to this year at the beginning of the year, my husband and myself went back to Morocco and spent 2 months there. And we came back to the US in March. So I was writing all that time. And then when I came back in March, the pandemic hit, and then George Floyd was murdered, and all of the things that kind of came out of that. I guess you could say the racial climate here, kind of the tension being really palpable. I decided to kind of rewrite some pieces I'd written before, and then write more pieces around, racial identity, healing, kind of just how it is to be in this body and be of color and be walking around, And I also decided at that point to start a Patreon account and to not post my writing on Facebook, mainly because I felt like the process of the writing is emotional labor, and I was not being compensated for it. So it was kind of like really looking at, okay, if this is my art and this is what I'm willing to share, this is how I want to do it. And I want to have an audience that is there to support me regardless of what I post, that is just kind of really interested in hearing my voice. So that's kind of how that developed. And what I ended up with was a body of work that I'm calling Blended Personal Perspectives on Truth. Mm-hmm. And right now it's being copy edited and getting ready to have kind of I'm going to print 12 copies to just have some readers look at it. And then hopefully I'll have it printed. And what's interesting about it is I decided to make it, so it's personal narrative poetry, but it's also a journal as well. So it's, what I wanted to do was invite the reader to process their feelings outside of having to bounce ideas off of Black bodies in a book. So people can just basically buy the work, and there's reflections at the end of most of the pieces to kind of suggest a leading question to have people go into that. And then, so I'm excited about that. Right now I'm working on rewriting some things about Morocco, and also wanting to, I have a big call towards writing about trauma and about healing trauma. Yeah. And I really feel like nature and the land has huge capacity for healing trauma. So it kind of gives me goosebumps even saying that, it's like, wow, how is that possible, Yeah. But just like you say, looking at me now, you're like, oh, she doesn't even kind of look like the same person, Mm-hmm. So I feel like that's part of it, is like, how can I learn to be with my body and be with nature and recognize that I am nature, and kind of find that space of oneness and stillness to heal. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Super exciting.
I'm getting goosebumps just listening to you, and I'm so many things just so landed in my core there. The idea that you're doing those personal narrative poetry and journal, and it's these blended personal perspectives, on truth. And this is like ringing alarm bells, because I'm doing a mixed genre memoir, which is personal essays, poetry, practical exercises, imagery, and photography. Yeah. And so I want to ask you the question, why are we doing it, that it's blended genres and not just one genre? I got my own take of it, why, but I'd like to hear from you, why?
Well, I think that what's going to be, and I keep talking to my kids about it. My kids are now like 19 and 23. And I keep talking to them about how the way forward in the future is not about reproducing what's already happened. It's really about dreaming and imagining new forms of creativity, about kind of stretching ourselves into areas that we didn't even know existed, really pulling forth from kind of the spiritual realm and the earth, and taking the time to listen, to kind of really, really feel into what's needed. I mean, it's kind of interesting. The other thing about that I want to say is that, when it comes to kind of being part of BIPOC community here in the US, I feel like it's really important to me that rather than me coming up with an idea and just kind of putting it out there, that I'm actually responding to a to a request, responding to a request that's coming from communities. So I'm not just kind of being like, oh, well, I think it would be really good if everybody just came around and we had a fire and da 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 da, you know, but kind of really listening, like what does this Black community need here? Well, maybe they need housing, maybe they need food, maybe they need childcare, you know, to really respond to what the specific need is, as opposed to my own idea of what that might be. So in that, I feel like we have to kind of ask people to step up and interact and not be passive. Mm-hmm. You know, so that's part of me wanting it to be a journal. It's kind of like, I'm not going to, and the same thing, even as a massage therapist, it's kind of like, I want you to be on the table and I want you to use your breath and I want you to kind of move your body if you need to. And we're going to do this together. Like healing is not something that I'm going to do to you. It's something that we're going to participate in, and hopefully I can hold space so that you can open your body to what it needs, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that it's the same in the writing. It's kind of like, you know, here I am just putting out something that was living in me so that you can respond to it. Yeah.
Talking about nature and healing and trauma healing, mm-hmm. I'm writing this essay at the moment around grief and how nature.
I knew we were going to talk about this. I just
did you know? I don't know.
It's so funny. I had a sense we were going to talk about this.
Yeah,
I have so much to say about that, girl.
Because like. I don't know. I mean, like, this is where I am. I'm sitting in it at the moment, grief, and writing about it and working through it in so many ways. You know, grief about the life that we've lost because of the pandemic, grief over the end of my marriage. But I know, because of the way society says, just got to get on with it, man. Stop wallowing, you know, just get on with it. That I'm still processing the grief of my father when I was 9 and my grief of my mum when I was 27. Yeah. But I know that getting into the sea, that's my bag, helps me heal, gets me out of my head and into my body. And it makes me present. It gets me present. Walking in the woods alone, away from everybody else, no judgment, nothing said, is another way that I can just drop into my body. But then, I don't know, it's a case of like, instead of being numb, going through my life numb, it wakes up my senses, and it means that I'm open and I'm smelling things and I'm feeling things and I'm alive. Yeah. And through that process, I come to that conclusion, you know, like, you know, it's all the natural cycle, isn't it? Death.
Right.
You know, and it means that I can move a little bit easier and accept grief and accept how it feels, all the emotions, anger. So this is me and grief, but tell me about you and grief.
I think that I was like, not so much now, but before, I think I was a denier. You know, I was a denier, an avoider, and a distractor. You know, I would like do anything to avoid, distract myself from actually feeling what I needed to feel. You know, I had a pretty, a traumatic childhood, a fair amount of emotional abuse. And I feel like I have been like walking around with that trauma, but not ever turning to look at it, always kind of like, oh, just sweep that under the rug, that doesn't really matter, you know, or knowing that there was some kind of like niggling little pain, something that was like tapping on my shoulder, and just ignoring it, you know. So when my mom passed away in 2017, actually it was, I'm going to be super honest, it was a relief. You know, we had a very difficult relationship. it had been years of kind of, I think when I think about it now, I think I felt like I was her protector and her caregiver when I was a child. And that kind of just transferred over into my adult life. So what happened was, after she died, I was in the UK for about 6 or 7 weeks, like taking care of her estate. I was very fortunate that I could be with her, not at the moment that she passed, but for about 3 days before she passed. I came from the US and was able to do that. And that was a deeply spiritually opening experience for me. I have never really had a fear of death. I've always had a curiosity. Mm-hmm. So that was, I'll just tell you, like the moment that actually kind of, after she had passed away, she passed away in the hospital, and my younger sister and myself were there, and a good family friend. And the nurses asked, is there anything that we can do for you? And I said, well, and I don't know why I said it. I said, I want to wash her body. And they were kind of like, really? And I was like, yep, that's what I want to do. So, and I asked my sister if she wanted to, and she said no, but she would sit and be present. And the family friends stayed as well. So because she had, like ports in her body and things like that, I had to have a nurse be present. But together we washed her body. And it was the most, I kind of felt like, wow, in some ways, human life is, when I think about her human life, and then I can think about other people's lives as well, it's like perfection and imperfection all at once, right? You can be so perfect. Like, she was the perfect mother for me, but she was so imperfect as well, right? Mm-hmm. So I felt like the one thing afterwards, thinking about it, I was like, wow, the one thing that I can do for you is send you away with my loving touch. And so that's what it was. It was kind of like this process, a ritual almost, of washing her body, putting her in a shroud, and then a couple of hours of sitting with that body, her physical body. I didn't feel like she was there anymore. I was like, okay, I'm done. I can leave. So in that moment, I kind of didn't necessarily feel a ton of grief. I wasn't like, I was maybe teary, but not like wailing, So I came back to the US, and about, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks after I left, a dear friend of mine passed away of cancer. And that kind of like, it was like everything started to spill out at that moment. I was sobbing and crying and like couldn't function for about 3 days because I was so in it, but I was like, thank the Lord that something cracked me open to feel it, because otherwise, before I couldn't feel it at all. I was like so busy kind of trying to hold everything together that I couldn't feel it. And we were on this piece of land at that point, and something in me just said, go out to the woods. And I went out into the woods, and I started this process of like moving woody debris around the woods. I was obsessed. Every day I would go out there. It was like it didn't matter if it was raining, frosty, whatever kind of weather. I'd just dress up and out I would go and be moving this wood around. And it was kind of symbolic because I felt like, oh, it's like I was shifting like all the decaying debris of my life, and kind of like moving it and clearing space for more air and more health and more of me to be present, really. I was like clearing away parts of me that maybe were not even me, I don't even know. So I did that for about, I don't know, a year. I was in the woods. My husband thought I was mad. Oh, she's in the woods again. I'd invite friends over with me. Can you come over and help me to move these logs? I'd be cutting down trees with a handsaw. I was obsessed with kind of cultivating and tending to the woods. And then I went to Morocco that first time. And after I came back, I was like, I don't feel like I need to do that anymore. I'm good. So it was kind of like, that process of grieving, of kind of like allowing my body to move it through. I can't tell you what I was thinking about whilst I was moving that wood around, but I know that it was transforming me in some way.
Mm.
So that's kind of, and I also feel like sometimes people grieve for things that they long to experience that they haven't experienced, you know? So it's kind of like, it's not just about death and dying, it's about longing too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so many things. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, for me, like, it was that ability to just allow my body and myself. Thank goodness I, you know, had a piece of land that I could do that on. To turn towards it and just let it take me until I came out the other end.
Yeah, it held
Yeah.
you. It held you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
A
It's
big
fun.
story.
It's I have this tendency when things get uncomfortable for me to get sweaty eyebrows. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how,
Yeah.
but it always sweaty eyebrows. And just then I was having sweaty eyebrows because what you were saying was really, really touching a nerve, a core, and so much truth there. I not only saw it, but I could feel it. And there was that rawness there, but also there's so much beauty there to sit with those feelings and work through them. And it does take courage, but then also it's that.
I think I felt like it's kind of, I write about it a little bit, you know, like feeling like if I turned towards it and actually let it take me, I might explode or something, you know, like I might just not have the capacity to, but I really believe that, you know, in our bodies are infinitely wise, you know, just like nature is. It's like bodies know what we can handle. And what we can't handle, you know, so, and I don't think that, you know, spiritually, I don't feel like I've ever been pushed, you know, allowed myself to be pushed through an experience that didn't serve me on the other side, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, the other side of this is way better. And it was sucked, but okay, you know?
Yeah. And it is.
Laugh about it now, right?
Yeah, and it's good that we can laugh because it is holding all those emotions, all those feelings, the joy and the pain. So many strands to pull up there. And your ancestry, you've got UK, Canada, and the States.
I was brought up in the UK, so I actually was born in Luton. I'm kind of like, sometimes when I say that, I'm like, Luton, you know? But I was born there. I don't feel, it's interesting because I don't feel like that's home at all. I don't feel like England is home to me in any way. But my grandparents were from the Caribbean. So my grandfather was from Dominica, my grandmother from Antigua, and my mom was born in Trinidad. And and I actually don't know my father. I never met my father. I was the product of a one-night stand. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, you know, like my star just descended and here I am, you know, like who go figure, you know. So I've never met him. He would have been, you know, the white side of my family because I'm of mixed race. But I was raised by my grandparents and my mom, and then she married again when I was about 4 years old. So I grew up there and then I met my husband and we moved to Hawaii together for a while. So we spent some time there. And he actually has a history with Canada. I don't, but, you know, we're close to Canada here. And then we moved from Hawaii to here.
So was nature, being close to the land, part of your upbringing, part of your childhood? Was it coming from the Caribbean side? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I have really strong memories of my grandfather, and I kind of like to give a shout out to him as an ancestor right now, you know, a good ancestor, like doing the work. So he was a gardener. And I think when I went to Dominica, later, about 10 years ago, and I realized, oh, you know, the way that people are with the land here is if you have it, you have to produce food. It's about sustainability. and resource, So my memories of him, even as a very young child, he cultivated the whole of his backyard into food production, built a greenhouse out of window panes, had fruit trees. And I used to follow him around, and I could, by the time I was very young, identify food plants by their leaf. Yeah. So that's how I started off, kind of having a connection to the land. And then I remember he would harvest, and we would walk around the neighborhood with a basket just to the neighbors, giving people food. It was kind of part of the ritual, like around this time of year, everybody would get pumpkin, squash, cabbage, whatever he was growing. Then when my mom was not a gardener really, because she was unwell from the time I was about 8 years old. But I did. I loved to have my hands in the earth. It was just like I could spend hours out there planting, weeding, cultivating, whatever it was. And I still have a garden now. I have a lot of berries and herbal medicinal plants. I'm not a huge I wouldn't say I produce enough food for our family to live, but it's enough to be able to go out there and kind of enjoy a little bit every now and again. So yeah, that definitely did impact me, still impacts me. Yeah. The connection to the land and having that as a resource is huge. Yeah. I just recently went to a gathering of young Black farmers from the Pacific Northwest, which was really exciting to me because I felt like, oh yes, they came from Seattle, so they were in an urban environment where they have a lot and they're into producing food. And I just thought to myself, it's so beautiful to see Black people back with the land, and to see them, so many of them talked about how healing it had been for them to go to this little plot of land and volunteer. And they kind of operate it like on an honor system. I think the gal who runs it said, if you come and you sweat, you can take some food. So kind of like that. And it was just like, oh, that's beautiful. Children and young people can have access to that even in the city. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. It's a reclamation. We're reclaiming the land because we've had that disconnection from the land. I've just been doing some research here around Black nature. That's what I call it, about Black and brown bodies. Connection with nature. And what we've been finding is that the older generation has this knowledge and the younger generation doesn't have this knowledge. Right. And there hasn't been that transference of that knowledge or those conversations taking place. Yeah. So it is a case of like, they might have come to the UK from rural areas, Asia, in Africa, in the Caribbean, and left it behind to move on to become urbanized. But there's a small number now who are trying to get back to the land, to reclaim, to remember that thing, and going to the elders to share that knowledge. And now there's going to be more of that, I don't know, joined up thinking between the ancestors and the young.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And it is so beautiful, and it's so needed, because there is that attitude, and I've said it myself, that we don't have a relationship with the land. But it's a lie to say that. We have had, and it's still there within our DNA, in our body memories, that there is that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think also here in the US, it's also kind of connected with slavery.
Yes.
And that feeling of like, I was a Black body and I was used for profit. This was a way for somebody to make profit by using my Black body to work on land. So it's almost like having to like go back to kind of pre-slavery times to remember, what was my connection to the land before that? And how can I still benefit from it now? Or how can I commune with it to, have a reciprocal relationship with it now? Yeah.
And that is going back to Africa. Mine is West Africa, and there it was. They worked the land. They worshipped gods and goddesses, the Orishas, who were
Mm-hmm.
connected
Yeah.
to the land, the rivers, the seas, and it was all the whole thing, holistic thing, all connected as one and in harmony, and that was
Yeah.
just like cut off, and the whole relationship with land changed. So it was a case of like, yeah, definitely when freedom came from slavery, it was get off the land, because it held such trauma and pain.
Right.
And
It helped trauma, yeah. And also I think that there was this feeling of industry is progress, a feeling of kind of like, if I can progress in industry, then I can support my family and it looks like moving forward. But I think actually now, in my mind, I think really simplifying and getting closer to the land looks like moving forward. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And we're still having, say, with the elders, the conversation of saying, why you want to go camp out?
Yeah, exactly.
There's no toilets. Why are you going backwards?
Yeah. Exactly.
But yeah, that is the way forward. It is a case of Jeff Bridges just said, no, the trees, let's talk to the trees. Let's go to the trees, because we need the trees. It's
absolutely.
So just thinking about Black nature, that's what brought me to Washington State on a residency, to talk to the indigenous people and their relationship with the land and how they were working with the Jefferson Land Trust. I was doing that, and now that was like maybe 6 years ago now. I was doing that because I had an issue of writing about my Black identity and writing about nature, because I wasn't seeing many examples within the UK setting of writing about a relationship with the landscape. I was thinking that I needed to find the words, find the language to actually marry these two together. Now I know it's just like, because of that relationship I have now and developed, I just write. And it's there. I've always been doing it, but for some way I needed to have that label on it, and I needed to strive. And I'm interested to see how is turning up in your writing, or how is it the foundation of your writing, or how do you
nature? How does like Black nature specifically?
Yeah.
Is that
I say Black nature because it's our Black bodies. It's always, my memoir is Black woman with / in nature. But the issue is, when I am with nature, all those sort of like identities and constructs are gone.
Yeah, it's nothing. It's not. It's not about that at all, is it? Been really fortunate. This is one of the benefits of trauma, right? Like, I don't know that we ever talk about the privileges or the benefits that you gain from being traumatized. But one of the benefits in me from being traumatized is that I'm really sensitive. So the benefit of sensitivity is that I can sit by a tree and listen, and quite easily ask the tree a question like what you're talking about and receive beautiful messages. Mm-hmm. And I do the same thing with human bodies as well. So I weave some of that in my writing. I'm thinking about, I could read you a piece in a minute if you want me to, but I have a piece specifically about an experience that I had with a cedar tree where I was actually out on the Olympic Peninsula by Lake Crescent. I don't know if you ever went there. It's a beautiful, deep lake. Did you dip in there?
Yeah, I'm sure we paddleboarded in it.
Yeah, so there's some cedar trees there, and I happened to be there and kind of like had my blanket and just nestled at the bottom of this cedar tree, and I couldn't get up. I was like, oh my God, I feel so comforted laying here. I just have to stay here. Mm-hmm. And when I eventually got up, I had a whole kind of download from the trees about their relationship with one another and how they survive, and I wrote a piece about it. So I have that piece. So I do let nature, I think, inform a lot of what I write about. I think also the sensitivity shows up in being a keen observer of details, of the smaller detail, the finer details in things that maybe some people, and I think I have a little bit of a poetic bent on some of the things that I see, so it kind of comes out a little bit like that too. And then of course there's this dipping deeply in, taking what's outside in and what's inside out.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about that quite a lot in my writing, like,
Yeah.
The ability to have what's inside be on the outside, kind of like what you're saying about even talking back to grief a little bit, like that vulnerability actually produces strength. If you can really fully step into the vulnerability with your courage, that you end up strengthened by it.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of, I think before I was maybe a little more censored, a little more like, I want to keep that stuff close to my chest. And now that I've been expressing and receiving validation for that kind of expression, I'm kind of like, oh, okay, I can just be who I am. And just like nature, like a tree is a tree, right? It's not apologizing for how tall it is or the fact that its leaves are falling off right now. It's just doing what it's doing,
Yeah, and that mirrors a conversation to me that I've had recently, and it's like the tree is just a tree. It's not trying to be anything else, it's a tree.
Right.
Bird is a bird. It's not trying to be anything, and it's just being itself. I'm not even going to say it's happy just being itself, because then I'm just like putting on a human feeling onto a tree.
Right.
Like they have their own way of feeling, and I'm not saying just saying how that should be.
Exactly.
We're nearly up to an hour here, so I'm gonna.
It's gone quickly.
Yeah. But how they can find out more about you or consider becoming a patron of you. And if you wanted to share some of your writing to read, that would be lovely. Awesome.
Yeah, I do have. I was recorded some pieces. So I have some audio on SoundCloud right now. Yeah, I think it's actually under my business name, which is Svara Sound. So I have some audio there. I have an Instagram at Velda Thomas 11, or 11 is my magic number, so I think it's 11. And then the Patreon is just patreon.com/Velda Thomas. You can find me there. There's not you actually have to become a member to really view a lot of the work there. So that's that. And I'm totally open to messages and any kind of interaction. Super fun. It's so great to talk to you, Cherie. I'm loving this.
It's so good to see you, sweetie.
I know. Hopefully one day we'll get to kind of together in the same country at some point.
That would be lovely.
Maybe have a little dip together. That would be sweet.
That would be so awesome. It would, yeah. But no, let's not leave it so long the next time, yeah?
I know. And I'm so happy that you're doing this. This is amazing.
Thank you.
It's such a good thing just to kind of bring that awareness around connection. Yeah, so much is possible. Yeah,
it is.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you for your time and energy. Hopefully see you again soon.
Okay, sweet.